My name's Gavin, and this is Genre Books, and it's Tuesday, which means it's Tag Tuesday. And today's tag is the Reader's Profile tag. This tag was created by Hilary at Book Bustle, and I was tagged by Pat at Book Chat with Pat. There are 11 prompts, 10 of which require answers. I've written the questions down, so bear with me as I skim my notes. Prompt number 1. What for you makes a good book? This is the most difficult question because I think everyone is going to pretty much say the same thing. I mean, at its barest, I would like a beginning, a middle and an end. Those aren't absolutely necessary, but I want a good story, I want engaging characters, I want something a little surprising. I want a good idea, which is probably why I'm always sort of attracted to science fiction. But that only really covers fiction. When it comes to non-fiction, I have a whole different bunch of requirements, and it depends what kind of book it is. Usually it's going to be historical, and what I would like in a book is footnotes rather than endnotes. That's a little bit of a pettifogging request, but that's just what I prefer. If it's a book about art, I'd like the pictures. Don't assume I know exactly which painting you might be talking about. And above all, know your subject, don't try to sell me something, and don't send me to a website. Prompt number 2, what are you currently reading? Well, I'm reading 2 fiction works. Today is the penultimate day of Rocket Summer, so tomorrow is my last chance to finish these 2. I will finish this tonight. This is The Furies by Keith Roberts, and with a fair wind I might finish this tomorrow, Flowers for Algernon by Daniel Keyes. Prompt number 3, what's the last book you didn't finish? This is also as a result of Rocket Summer, and the last book I didn't finish is The Four-Sided Triangle by William F. Temple. I like where the book is going, but I just ran out of time in the weekly prompt, so I will have to catch up with this definitely by the end of the year. It's not one I finished out of disinterest, it's one I ran out of time on. Prompt number 4. What obscure book do you wish other people would read? So I mention him a lot on my tags, but that's because I rate him highly, and I'm going to turn to Geoff Dyer again, and I wish people would read Out of Sheer Rage by Geoff Dyer. This is a difficult book to describe. It's a memoir. The kernel of the book is the writings that Dyer is keeping as he tries and fails to write a book about D.H. Lawrence. It is a masterclass examination of procrastination, and I would recommend it to anybody and everybody. It's frequently hilarious, it's sometimes moving, it's honest, and it is completely overlooked. I don't think I've seen anyone do a video on it. I will reread it one day and I will do that video myself. Prompt number 5. What's the longest book you've read? I think, because Tolkien counts it as one book, I'll count it as one book, and I will say The Lord of the Rings. That's got to be the longest book that I've read. Other very long books, I think Middlemarch, Dr. Strange and Mr. Norrell, that's what it's called, Susanna Clarke, and one which it must be over 1,000 pages. It certainly feels like it. Was Ayn Rand's Atlas Shrugged. I had to see what people were making such a fuss about. In some ways I regret reading it, in some ways I don't, because I don't feel, if I wanted to criticise it, that not having read it would be a good place to do so. Whether or not you agree with her outlook, just be aware that she will be making the same points to you in more and more outlandish terms continually for at least the first 850 pages. And then there follows a 50-page speech recapping in case you missed the point. I think people who have missed the point include every billionaire who is busily building rockets or cave systems in New Zealand. I think one of the reasons I read it was that I had actually read The Fountainhead, which does the same thing but much more persuasively and with much more narrative cohesion and engaging characters, even if they're still not likeable characters. Yes, that's something I've read but not drunk the Kool-Aid. Prompt number 6. If you were to have a dinner party with 5 fictional characters, who would they be? Let's liven this up a bit. And let's have a good old party. I want Mr. Pickwick from the Pickwick Papers. I want Granny Weatherwax from the Discworld series. I want Bertie Wooster from Jeeves and Wooster. I want Falstaff from Shakespeare. And I want Pompey Casmilus from Stevie Smith's A Novel on Yellow Paper. I don't know who's picking the bill up, but it's going to be a riot. Prompt number 7. 5 books you'd want if you were stranded on a desert island.
At this point, I reveal myself in my true colours as a stick in the mud.
There is, as I think most people know, a long-running series on British radio, and by long-running I think it's been going for sort of 60, 70 years at this point, and that is Desert Island Discs. Now in Desert Island Discs, that week's guest is allowed 10 records, but there's also a couple of books in there, and they are given, I think, a copy of the Bible and a copy of Shakespeare. So I'm going to give a list of 6 books, including the Shakespeare, as I'm assuming the Shakespeare is just part of the deal. So, book number 1 is my Shakespeare, and it's a complete works. It's some very small writing, and it's a book that I'm going to be becoming quite familiar with during September. And I'm going to keep it quite boring and traditionalist for this. I want long books, and I want books that I should have read and will have no excuse not to read on my desert island. 1,000 Nights and One Night. I'm partway through the first volume of this. It would be a good chance to finish this one off. Robert Musil's A Man Without Qualities. That's a big old book. The Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire by Edward Gibbon. I don't think I'm ever going to get around to reading that if I'm not sat down with nothing else to do. And so that I would feel connected to BookTube even if I am marooned on a desert island, I'll take Remembrance of Things Past by Marcel Proust, so I can pretend I'm with the group breed that's due in 2025. And finally, because I might be able to pick up a tip or two, Robinson Crusoe by Daniel Defoe. Again, I'm presupposing that all my answers have to be fiction here. If it's non-fiction, I'd want a good book on raft building. I could probably make the raft out of the Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire. I'd want a copy of the Encyclopaedia Britannica. I'd want a good book on tropical flora, so I knew if what I'm eating is safe. And maybe a decent DIY book. Prompt number 8. 1 book you could not put down. It's about 3 decades since I've read this, but Jonathan Coe's What a Carve Up. I don't know if I've mentioned that book on this channel before, but I think it's one of the sharpest, wittiest books I've read in those last 30 years. Jonathan Coe has written plenty since, but that still remains my favourite of his books. So going from something I really like to perhaps not something that I like quite so much, which prompt number 9, 5 books or authors that you will never read. Now there's a bit of a theme here but I have only chosen 2 politicians. I will be as fair as I can be and say that if the books had really, really good reviews, I might be tempted. But they don't. So I will not be reading any Nadine Dorries. She was inexplicably, for a time, the Minister for Culture in this country. I will also not be reading any Geoffrey Archer. Now, I found out something about Lord Archer recently, which made me like him a little bit. You know what? If I was very tribal, I wouldn't say it, but I'm going to try to be fair and even-handed. Most of what that convicted perjurer says or does, I can't stand. He took an early and a principled stand on the post office scandal that we had in this country recently. He tried to get an inquiry going when there was no appetite from the authorities to do so. He funded one himself. Although it was toothless, it kept the story somewhat in the public eye until things recently came to a head earlier this year. And he didn't have to do that, and that was a principled stand. Now, I could be churlish and say that even a stopped clock is right twice a day, but I'm not. I'm going to say well done to him for that, but it still doesn't mean I'm reading any of your books. And this next one is difficult. Ezra Pound. I used to like the poetry. I then found out some things about him, so it put me off of him a bit. I then read some more about the things I didn't like about him, and god damn it, I'm never reading the man again. I'm glad to say I know nothing about the next gentleman's politics. It's just on stylistic disagreement that I'm not reading any more of his books, and that is Samuel Richardson. It's been over a quarter of a century, but I've still not gotten over it. It was either Clarissa or Pamela. I think it was Pamela that I read. And if we go back to the longest books you've ever read, this is a very long book. And this feels like the longest book I ever read. I never met a main character with less agency than the main character in Pamela / Clarissa. I won't read it. I just won't do it. And lastly, and this is on general principle, James Patterson. I've never read a James Patterson book. I do not like the way he is just farming stuff out for other writers. I guarantee you he is taking a bigger cut than them when you see a James Patterson with massive James Patterson on the cover and very small with Joe Bloggs. You know that Patterson has scribbled something down on the back of an envelope. He's given it to poor Joe. Joe's written the entire book, having read all the other James Patterson books to learn the style, and James Patterson, because he is the marquee name, takes a big cut of the cheque. I can't stand the way the supermarket shelves are dominated with his books. Feel free to tell me I'm wrong, because I am doing this from a position of ignorance. I might, if I was to lose a bet, read the book he wrote with Dolly Parton. In fact, that would be the only one. And that's only because I like Dolly so much. Prompt number 10, if you were to write a book, what would it be about? Well, I keep getting ideas for books, and I have them all jotted down somewhere. But the one I'm really keen on, and the one I had started with my research and notes for until the British Library was shut by its hacking attack, was a book on the Hanseatic League. And I will have to before the year, if not definitely the new year. Have to find a way to get that back into my routine, to visit the British Library and get the books out. Well, on the desk, you're not allowed to take them. There are plenty of academic works about the Hanseatic League. There is no generalist work, no introductory work about the League. And I think it's too interesting a subject to not have one. So yes, I've been playing with that idea for a couple of years. I have made a start. I've got a couple of notebooks filled. I want to soak up as much information as I can about it. I have a vague idea of structure, but I want to be led by the facts that I find rather than the structure I want to impose on it. And I should imagine the reason there isn't a generalist introductory work about it is because there isn't a publisher who would want to publish it, especially in Britain, especially in Brexit Britain, when I might have to drop the information in there that our beloved sterling currency takes its name from Easterling, which is what the people in London used to call the Hanseatic League merchants because their money and their credit was so good. The Great British Pound is based on a German nickname. But maybe when the country gets over its collective psychosis, there'll be an interest in previous examples of pan-European trading cooperation that people might like to re-examine our part in that story, because we had big dockyards in London, in King's Lynn, in Boston, owned by the Hanseatic merchants. Most of the wool exporting that we did was done through them for 150 years. Anyway, going on about my pet subject now, so I'll shut up. Until next time, bye. Oh, I'm tagging people below the line.